Views and opinions expressed in this production are those of the individual and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Shooters Nation or our sponsors. Information provided on this show is not a replacement for legal counsel or professional training. Listener and viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on live shows.
Welcome to the Shooters Nation podcast, the talk show for you, the armed citizen. Join us as we discuss guns and gear, training, mindset and knowledge, industry news and buzz, and of course, the firearms culture. Be sure to join us after the show at shootersnation.com and become part of the Shooters Nation.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Shooters Nation podcast. I'm your host, David Yancey, Janitor-in-Chief here at the Shooters Nation World Headquarters in Nashville, Tennessee. And this is episode number 3. Co-hosting tonight with me is Mark Lancaster. You all know Mark from our previous episodes, but just in case this is your first time with us, Mark is the proprietor of Squared Away Customs in New Hampshire. They are a manufacturer of quality custom Kydex handgun holsters and carry gear. Hey, Mark.
How are you guys?
Doing good. Thanks for joining us. Also tonight, we have Brad Jones.
Yes, sir. Hello.
And Brad, looks like you're joining us from a palatial estate. That is probably one of the best hotels that our country has to offer, if what I'm seeing on video.
The wonderful Hampton Inn. Trying to rack up them Hilton points to get me maybe another free weekend away with the lady.
Another free weekend in a Hampton Inn.
Yeah. Hey, it doesn't take much to impress some people.
Oh man! And also tonight we've got Jordan Linscheid. Jordan, it looks like you're I don't know, man. Are you in a competitor for the Hampton, or are we squaring off against another hotel chain here?
Well, what I can tell you, even though I'm no firearms expert by any means, is that I did stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night, and tonight exactly the same. So there's my formal qualifications.
That's great. It's like the beauty of technology, and you know. So I'm in Nashville, Mark's in New Hampshire. You guys are scattered on I think we've got north, south, east, and west covered tonight. So
yeah,
it's pretty great. Yeah. So for those of you that are listening in, Brad and Jordan are some of the guys that Mark and I hang out with pretty regularly, thanks to the internet. They're each avid shooters, and perhaps more importantly, they're just regular everyday folks. And they're good guys with guns that you probably wouldn't even know were armed unless you already knew them, or unless they chose to let you know that. And so the reason why that's important is because it's honestly consistent with one of my goals for the Shooters Nation podcast. And, namely, here's my take on it. There's so much bad news right now about guns and honestly about gun owners that I hope that the people who are listening to the show who maybe are not shooters themselves or even gun owners might start to see that, some of us who are just regular people like them. And, so tonight's episode, I'm not going to say that we don't have special guests, because both of you guys are our special guests tonight. But, really, I just wanted to kind of, hang out with y'all and talk about, some of the things that are going on in the world today. Talk a little bit about just you as an armed citizen, and then have some fun and just sit around and shoot the breeze, so to speak. So, but I guess, as you're listening to this, here's really what I kind of want you to take away for the moment about, the group of us. Philosophically speaking, we're the people that you work with. We're the folks that you're going to sit next to at church. We're the people that coach your kids' ball teams. Gun owners in general. We're the doctors and nurses who take care of you at the hospital. Some of us are stay-at-home dads, stay-at-home moms. None of this panel I don't think qualifies as a stay-at-home mom. So anyway, no, nobody's going to own that tonight.
No.
But we're your neighbors. For some of you, we're your family members and your friends. And, there might be a chance that you had no idea that we were gun owners or that we carry concealed. So there it is. It's a very salient truth, I guess, of the matter, that you're probably standing next to us in public at the bank or at the grocery store, or, sitting next to us in the restaurant. And you have no idea. And, frankly, that's kind of the way we like it. But at the same time, we want you to understand that the gun owners that you never encounter, that you encounter daily and you never realize you're encountering them, they're there. And that, frankly, some of us would probably risk our lives to save you, a total stranger, if, push came to shove. So, it's not always a bad guy with a gun. You're probably surrounded every day by good guys with guns that you had no idea about. So anyway, welcome to the podcast, gentlemen.
All right. Happy to be here. Thanks, David.
Now, I'm glad you guys showed up. I really appreciate it. So, I guess we'll just kind of skip right into it and in the interest of time. First thing I wanted to talk about with y'all, we talk about this a lot on the internet, but let's share our conversation with everybody else tonight. Being the armed citizen, I'm interested, and I think our audience might be interested in, why do you carry? Why have you chosen to carry a gun? So, Jordan, why don't we start off with you?
Sure. Well, I'm in my mid-20s, and I've been carrying since shortly after I turned 21. And part of the reason I started carrying, or I'd say in large part, was because of my interest in law enforcement at a young age. It's a career I was considering pursuing, and I attended a Citizens Police Academy class just to learn more about local law enforcement and do some ride-alongs. And during that class, something that was continually brought up, and not in any sort of negative way, but was just how police officers can't always be there for you. They want to serve and protect, but as people quip, when seconds count, the police are only minutes away. And many of the officers impressed on me that I should look into procuring the ability to defend myself. And I'd grown up as an avid hunter with family, but long guns and handguns are quite different. And so there were also some events which struck our nation around the time I turned 21. And that really motivated me and also some personal experience just motivated me to not only own a handgun, but begin carrying it every day, everywhere I could. Not out of a sense of paranoia or thinking that I was some sort of sheepdog, if you will, but just realizing that the last position I wanted to be in was one where I or a loved one was in danger, and I was unable to defend them or myself simply out of desire for convenience or comfort. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, no,
that was kind of my motivation.
Well, there's, honestly, this is a question that there's no right or wrong answer to. I really, I think that we've probably got listeners that, our average listener may already carry a gun, but I think we've probably got listeners that might be on the fence about the whole thing. And recent events have got them thinking about, do they want to, and they're trying to work through it themselves. So sharing your story, maybe resonates with somebody else. So I appreciate that. Brad, how about you?
Well, I don't want to say my situation is a little bit differently, but like Jordan, I grew up, I did a little bit of hunting. I had, some 22 rifles and shotgun. But then after I got out of college and I got my first job after college, I started having to travel a lot for work. So it kind of became one of those things where I didn't necessarily feel the need or I didn't feel the want to carry, but more so the need to carry from a protection standpoint. If you keep hearing all these things on the road about fake police officers pulling over, a car, and then, as the story trickles down, something bad happens. And yeah, I do have to travel a lot. I drive approximately 45,000 miles a year for work. And if I'm stopped on the side of the road with a flat tire or something, and you want to hope that somebody stops, to lend you a helping hand. But at the same time, you want to hope that person is a good citizen and not someone that's looking to take advantage of you.
Right.
Plus, when I got married, my wife is partially disabled. She's not in a wheelchair, but the situation is that if she had to run away from a situation, she can't run. It's hard for her to move with that type of, angst to get out of a situation, and just trying to think about even walking into Walmart. It's not, we don't purposely put ourselves in situations that we feel like we're going to be in danger.
Right.
But anymore, it's at Walmart, it's at the gas station. It's not when you're in that seedy part of town that you don't need to be in after dark. It's just, it's everyday Joes like us that, we're pumping our own gas and somebody walks up with a gun or a knife. And, I just didn't want to be put in that situation where I wasn't able to protect her, being someone that couldn't, necessarily protect herself as well as some other folks can.
Does your wife carry a gun?
She does not. She does not have her concealed weapons permit at this time. I got her at Christmas this last year. I got her a gift card for her concealed class to be taken at the local gun shop. It's one of those things, being that she is handicapped, that she doesn't want to be put in a situation where she feels like she has to use it. And if she doesn't have it, then she knows that she will purposely go the extra mile to avoid those types of situations. Because if you have to shoot somebody, are you going to have to duck for cover? Are you going to have to jump in or out of a vehicle, quickly, and that sort of thing? Right. So she is of the mindset that she does want to be able to protect herself, but at the same time, she doesn't want that to be the only thing she's able to rely on.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead of things here, but I think that your situation maybe resonates with a lot of people. And even if you're listening, you may not have somebody in your family that is at a physical disadvantage, but, man, I've got kids. My kids aren't old enough to carry a gun themselves. And so my role as a protector is to be able to take care of them no matter what the situation is. And the gun is a tool. And it sounds to me like, what you're saying, Brad, is, you're your family's protector. And so you wanted to make sure that you were equipped to handle whatever the situation might be.
Yes, exactly. And like I said, it's just pumping gas, walking out of a restaurant downtown.
Right.
You never know these days when something is going to happen.
Right. I've heard it said before. I took a, I guess what I would call a defensive pistol class very, very early on in my time here in Tennessee. And the police officer that was conducting the training said, criminals travel to work the same way that you and I do. They generally don't, go, get up to no good in their own neighborhood, right? They're going to go somewhere else because, you don't mess in your nest, so to speak. So you're right. I mean, it can happen to you at a gas station. It could happen to you walking, from your car to the, or from your car to the movie theater or vice versa or whatever, you don't get to pick when it's going to happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we could pick when it was going to happen, we just wouldn't be there if we knew ahead of time.
That's for sure.
I mean, exactly. I don't think anybody who does carry particularly wants to shoot anybody. If you're carrying a firearm or any other type of weapon for protection,
right, and
your primary goal is not to defend yourself or your family, but to purposely look for those types of situations, then I feel like you definitely have a skewed outlook on the entire arena of carrying a firearm or a weapon, a blade, or whatever it may be. You're looking for trouble. You are just as guilty as the perpetrator who is, going to mug someone.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with you. My philosophy is I just want to be left alone. I'm going to look for every opportunity I can to get away from a situation before I have to, use force, whatever that force might be. So, yeah, that's powerful, man. Mark, what about you?
Yeah, and the thing about that though is I unfortunately don't think that all carry people are necessarily with that mindset.
Right.
Because I think that there unfortunately is some guys with the gun on their hip that are just more like, I got a gun, don't come near me. You know what I mean? You can't stop me.
Yeah.
That cocky arrogance that comes with an uneducated, maybe not uneducated gun guy, but like somebody that just doesn't really think about the repercussions and doesn't necessarily think about that they have a deadly weapon on their hip. This isn't a cell phone. You know what I mean? This is
right.
This is a big deal. Unfortunately, I think there's some of them out there. But I mean, for me, I just refuse to be a victim, right? Like, so, it kind of clicked one day, like, I have the ability to carry this. I have the ability to shoot this well. I have the ability to protect my friends and family, and I'm going to do that, because having the ability and not doing it in an instance where I needed to, because I wasn't carrying,
right,
seems like it would be a lot harder to live with for me. I'm of the mindset of, if I'm going to carry, I'm going to carry all the time, because the one time I don't and something happens and I could have done something, like, am I going to be able to live with myself after?
Wow. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the mindset of, like, I could have done something, but I didn't have my gun that day because I didn't feel like wearing a belt, or I just wanted to wear gym shorts, or, I was just running to the store real quick. It just, for me, I don't ever want to have to deal with that feeling of I wish, shoulda, coulda, woulda, when it comes to something like a gun, because that equals life, and somebody brought it to me in that way. And ever since, I've had a real hard time not carrying, with the exception of, because I'm kind of landlocked a little bit. I have Maine to my northeast, and in Vermont to my west, which is all good to go. But directly below me is Massachusetts, which is a no-go,
right,
for non-resident and most residents even. And then a little bit west of that is New York State, which is huge, which is a no-go. Beneath Massachusetts is Connecticut, no-go. Rhode Island, no-go. It's like I'm kind of landlocked up here in the Northeast. So when traveling, it gets a little tricky sometimes.
Right.
I try and fly out of New Hampshire, and that way I don't have to go in these other states with my firearm at all. But yeah, I try and keep it on me as much as possible, because I don't ever want to be put in that position. And I get it. Some people, it's just not in the cards. My wife would love to be able to carry, but it's immediate termination at her employer if she's found with the property. So it's not an option for her.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You said something that I've got to point it out. You said that having that gun equals life. And, right now, the media climate is guns equal death, and so, but I'm thinking about this, man, you said a lot just then that I hope people digest and really think about. But, if you had first aid skills and you saw somebody that was in a medical crisis and you could save their life and you chose not to, that's akin to having a tool that could save your life and save the lives of, your family, your loved ones, your friends, or just a complete stranger, and choosing not to carry it because it's inconvenient. It's almost, like you said, it that tool equals life in the right hands. Sure, it equals death in the wrong hands, but it equals life in, the right hands. So powerful.
Well, then I feel like, being able to, when you give yourself the responsibility of potentially ending a life,
right,
it is equally as valuable and equally your responsibility to be able to save a life.
Right.
In terms of, medical and CPR and things like that, you carrying this firearm, you have the ability to end life as someone on this planet knows it.
Sure.
And that's going to be on you. do you also want it on you when you see that person that's choking, or you see that person, that needs mouth to mouth or CPR, and you can't provide that? I feel like that is, it's equally your responsibility to have that training, as well as knowing when and how to fire your gun. So.
Absolutely. I think something else that's important to consider is just that when you're out with friends and family, you all have different experiences, different training, different levels of proficiency, whether it's in performing medical aid or, carrying a defensive tool. Right. Not everyone's, we're not all going to have equal levels of training or experience in one field, and not everyone's comfortable carrying a firearm to defend themselves. But that's something that's valuable. And I've got plenty of friends that don't carry a gun, never would, and some who are even opposed to the idea of the armed citizenry at the level that we have now in this country.
Right.
But they'll ask me to go along with them to see movies and on outings, because there's a level of security that they feel just having someone along who they know is responsible and who has a proper mindset. And just hearing that from them, it makes me feel really good knowing that they've got a level of respect. Like Mark said, not everyone who carries a gun has necessarily the proper mindset of hoping beyond all hope that they never have to use that. And so I think it's very important that we as firearms owners and everyday carriers communicate that through our actions before and after the people around us, whether that's coworkers or friends, discover that we carry on a daily basis.
Yeah. So I don't want to go too deep on this one, because I got some other questions I want to ask. I'm just kind of being the proxy tonight, asking questions I think maybe our listeners would ask if they were sitting here at the table with us, having a meal or having a drink with us. So let's get into, maybe some other questions here. Well, let me back up before I do that. I'll share why I carry. And it's really no different than either, any of you guys. So I've been carrying now for, I guess, 2 decades. I'm in my mid 40s, and the state of Kentucky started issuing carry permits. The current handgun carry permit in, I guess, the mid 90s, right? So I got it pretty quickly when it became available. Yeah. It was considered a CCDW, concealed carry deadly weapon. Kentucky actually has, I don't know, Brad, you're a former Kentucky boy yourself. I mean, it's not really constitutional carry, right? But I mean, we could carry open carry without a permit all along. So
yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and so the permit actually became, for concealed. But I got my permit then. And I tell you, the thing that made me really want my carry permit was I worked at the time for a company that did consulting for banks, technology consulting for banks. And, we were working one morning, really early, dark morning hours on a automated teller machine out in the middle of, nowhere. And it was a little brick building. And, my boss and I were inside that building working on the technology equipment side of it. No access to money. We're there to fix computers, basically. And a car came circling through the parking lot. And, we noticed them circle in, and they came back around. And, they circled around a few times, and, it was really fishy. And they finally pulled up and asked, window rolled down, and the passenger asked, hey, you guys got access to the money? And I thought, no good could possibly come of this conversation at all, right? And so, I was like, no, man, we're working on the computers in here. And he kind of nodded like, yeah, okay, cool. And when the passenger door, like you could see, the car kind of came to a jerky little motion when he threw it in park, and the door opened up. I slammed the door shut, and I looked at my boss. I'm like, we're stuck in here, until these guys go away. And we stayed in there for a good long while. And we didn't have cell phones. This is, in the freaking, early 90s. And, we didn't have cell phones. We were sitting there thinking, how can we possibly get word out? And of course my boss is worried about the van full of company equipment and stuff. I'm like, forget your van. We're in here, there's a door between us and them, right? If they really decide they want to get in here, they might try to get in here. And, mercifully they left. They didn't even mess with our stuff, but they were seriously interested in that. And I thought, man, where's a cop when you need one? And that was my first introduction to the thought the police are, minutes or could be an hour away if you really need them. And when Kentucky started offering the carry permit, I got one, because I thought if I'm going to be working around, bank equipment, at 0 dark 30, I kind of want a fighting chance. And so, I've just never stopped since then. So that's kind of my story, but, all right. So rather than bore people with more of that, I think, let's talk about the fun stuff. Let's talk about gear. What do you carry? Right. So I think everybody kind of wonders, especially if they're new to the whole thing. They walk into a gun shop, and we talked about this last episode. They walk into a gun shop, there's a sea of guns, and they have no idea what they're going to choose. And I know from talking to you guys, y'all have gone through several iterations of picking the right handgun for yourself. So, we'll start off with Jordan again, I guess. What are you currently carrying for your everyday carry handgun?
Sure. Well, right now I'm carrying a pretty highly modified Glock 17. I'm actually, as I'm sure all of you know, quite the CZ fanboy. And I, for the past several years, have been carrying double action, single action guns. I don't have a problem with hammers, and I like tinkering with them, smoothing the actions out, getting them to the place where I am very proficient and enjoy shooting them. But something that's been of interest to me in the past year is I'm trying to remember the correct term. I want to say RMR, that's the generic, but trying to experiment with something besides iron sights.
Like a reflex sight,
not just for the range. Reflex sight, yeah, there we go.
RDS.
And RDS, okay, yep. And so I decided to, thanks to Mark, purchase and have assembled all the components of a Glock 17 that was RMR ready. And so I haven't gotten a chance to put more than 1,000 rounds through it yet, but I've been carrying that for the past several months and really enjoying it. And this is kind of a test animal for me, which is going well so far. And I'm thinking that I'll have to send off a couple of my other handguns, including my CZ P10C, which is my preferred striker fired gun, to have the slide milled for an RMR. So that's what I'm carrying right now, and I've got it squared away in a squared away customs holster. So much to Mark's chagrin, he has to offer
nice tie-in there
for those crazy CZ fanboys.
Those squared away guys.
We're gonna start shipping with scarves.
Scarves.
You ought to. And some beard oil.
Not all. Yeah. Well, I was going to say not all CZ guys have beards and are hipsters, but I've got a beard and I have CZs, and so I can't. I plead the fifth. So all right, very good. I'm just going to go like across the screen. Mark, what about you, man?
My carry gun is a Glock 17 as well.
Okay.
Also with an RMR. I carry a Agency Arms Glock 17 with a Trijicon RMR 06, which is the 3.25 MOA dot. It's got suppressor height, iron sights, in case the dot goes down, so you can still run the gun. I carry it appendix carry in a Squared Away Customs Kilo, a very basic style holster. Oddly enough, I own a holster company, and I have crappy gear. I use not crappy gear, but like the most basic stuff there is. Everybody's like, "That's it." Yeah,
the cobbler's
like,
kids have no
my
shoes.
edges. I just cut one, make it work, stick it in my pants. Like that's the end.
That could be your slogan. Really, that could be a new slogan for Squared Away Customs.
I just cut one and stick it in my pants.
Yeah, we'll cut one and you can stick in your pants. So yeah.
And then I carry a backup mag in a carrier that also holds a 800 lumen handheld Surefire flashlight.
Okay.
So it's a 2-unit carrier, so it carries my mag and the flashlight in one. Carry it on my offside OWB because they go from the belt up, right? Rather than like a handgun goes from the belt down.
Right.
So concealable all summer long with a t-shirt.
Okay. Have you ever accidentally grabbed a flashlight and tried to shove it into the base of your Glock?
No.
Okay.
because
You don't have to
my
admit it.
reloads in front of it.
Okay.
And the flashlight's behind it. I just never had that issue.
Right. Yeah.
My backup mag has a +4 Falco Defense base plate.
Okay.
And it's not just because I feel like I need the +4 rounds. It's more of having a really good purchase.
Yeah.
And the other thing that most people don't think about is that corners of magazines are somewhat sharp and pointy.
Indeed.
But with the base plates, they're all anodized aluminum and round and smooth. So rubbing up against my hip all day long and the side of my stomach is a lot more preferable with a base plate than a factory Glock mag with that point in the back corner.
Right.
It's a comfort issue.
Yeah.
So that's what I. Yeah, that's what
To
I care.
summarize, find something round and smooth and stick it in your pants.
Exactly.
That could also be a slogan.
Yes.
Yeah, for certain advertising venues, you could use these options, Mark, for a small fee. So yeah.
Yeah.
Brad, what about you, man? Glock? Have you got a Glock? If you say you got a Glock, then we got a theme going here. So
I do not have a Glock.
Yay.
I did have a Glock.
Okay.
When I first started carrying, I started carrying with a Glock 36,
Right.
and I like Glocks. Glocks have always functioned flawlessly.
Right.
You will never hear me say a bad thing about a Glock other than it just doesn't fit my hand.
Right.
When I would go to the range, it performed flawlessly. I could not hit the broadside of a barn with it, so I started to, then start making some adjustments. This was around the time that the Shield came out, so I got a Shield. It fits my hand a little bit better, but it is a little slimmer, so there's some issues there. And then I got turned on to a 9 compact from Smith & Wesson, and that is currently what I am carrying. I also do still have the Shield, and kind of based on dress for the day, because sometimes I do have to dress business casual. It is a little bit easier to tuck a shirt in with the Shield than it is the 9 compact double stack. Also carry at least one spare magazine and a knife, be it a pocket knife, a fixed blade of some type. I think that, being able to support knife wielding hand to hand is just as important. Knowing that most self-defense situations take place in that first 21 feet.
Sure.
And if my gun gets knocked away, or I heaven forbid, I run out of bullets, I still got to be able to protect myself. But it's a stock M&P 9 compact. Other than I do have +2 base plates on the magazines. Factory trigger, factory sights. At this point, anyway, I am getting ready to upgrade both the trigger and the sights. I'll be picking up an Apex kit for this, as I've done in the Shield, and also the full size, 9mm that I have. So,
Right.
Also in a squared away custom holster that I got turned on to a couple of years ago through the Facebook group that we all share. So
Right.
very, it is a basic setup. There's nothing fancy about it, but it goes bang every time I go to the range. It fits my hand. It's comfortable. It's easy to conceal, and it works.
Yeah. So you went from a M&P Shield 9 to the 9 compact, and that's kind of your thing. And the Shield sticks around.
Yeah, and I still do carry the Shield sometimes, depending on what the dress code is for where I'm going. And then, unfortunately, sometimes my job does take me to some government establishments where I'm not able to carry anything. But most of the time, if I am outside of my home or my car, I will either have a Shield or a 9 compact on me somewhere.
Awesome. Okay. Well, so
Brad heard that the 9C was the answer.
that's a popular statement.
That's
yeah,
the answer
9C.
that I heard, but I am still searching for the question, unfortunately. So we'll hopefully be able to find that out soon.
Well, yeah. Okay. So, all right. So I'll take a swing at it. I think currently my go-to is a Smith & Wesson M&P 9, the M2.0. So I've carried a Glock 19, and I've got several Glock 19s. I like the Glock 19. I have nothing against it. It's not pretty. It's not it's nothing to write home about, but it's super reliable and I enjoy it. For that very reason that it's just reliable and it's a known quantity. But the M&P 2.0, they've made significant improvements in that one, I think. I was an early adopter of the M&P series. I've still got a original M&P 40 that's got, golly, man, close to 20,000 rounds to it, I would think, from the various classes. I mean, I've shot the finish off that thing, right? So, but I never really just enjoyed carrying it because it's kind of big. When Smith & Wesson came out with the M&P 2.0 compact, they finally, I felt like, got something that was a good competitor for the Glock 19, and it just fits my hand better. Kind of like you, Brad. The Glocks, they're great guns. They're reliable. You can't go wrong with them. God knows if you buy one and you decide you don't like it, you can sell it for nearly what you paid for it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not really an investment, but it kind of is. You're not going to lose money on the thing, unless you sturple it, with a soldering iron and make it look like your dog chewed on it.
Let your dog chew on it.
That's right. Yeah. But
yeah.
I've seen dogs chew on Glocks that make better looking stippling. I'm being facetious, folks. It's stippling. It's texturizing the gun, like we talked about last week with Ian. But the M&P just seems to fit my hand better, and it's been super reliable. And so anyway, that's what I carry. And I've got a. Oh my God! I'm gonna just go ahead and plug you guys, Mark. I've got a Squared Away Customs kilo coming for it.
4
Yeah, 4 for 4, man. I got other SAC gear for my other guns. I've got SAC gear for my Glock 19. My wife's got SAC gear for her H&K VP9. But the thing that I probably carry in most right now is I've got a leather inside the waistband holster from TT Gun Leather that is just super comfortable and it works. I think there are some disadvantages and advantages for leather, just like there are disadvantages and advantages for Kydex. It's definitely thicker and bulkier and what have you, but I'm looking forward to trying a thinner Kydex holster, just especially as we get into the summer months where you want to dress a little bit lighter and not have such a big profile of a gun. But that's what I carry, and if I can't carry it, like you, Brad, I've got an M&P Smith & Wesson M&P Shield 9mm that fits really well inside of a front hip pocket on a pair of cargo shorts, and so I've got a very thin Kydex holster that keeps the trigger protected, and I'll drop that in my shorts and the front pocket of my shorts, and I can be pumping gas, like we've talked about, and I could have my hands in my pocket, and the guy that's standing across from me eyeballing me, wondering, could I roll this guy and take his truck or take his car or, his money, whatever, doesn't realize I got my hand on my gun. And so that's kind of the way I like it. So,
exactly.
Yeah. All right.
And as we all grow older, and I think, the problem that a lot of men face is we grow older. We also grow a little more portly in
bigger.
The midsection.
Yeah.
Yeah. A little bigger. Having the right holster and the right gun, it becomes even more important.
Absolutely.
As as we move on, through the stages of our life.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, that's a constant struggle for me. Becoming more of a man than I was yesterday, literally.
Yeah.
So.
And I, the one of the things that I found is if it's not comfortable,
you're gonna leave it at home.
I'm just not going to carry it.
That's right.
I'm just going to leave it at home. And that I can attest that to several holster makers' nameplates.
Yeah.
If it's just not comfortable, you're just not going to carry it.
So that leads me into the next question. How often do you guys carry? Mark, you've pretty well nailed that one. I think, let's start with you. You said daily, right?
Yeah. I'm not carrying when I go to the post office.
Okay. Yeah.
Period. Right. At home doing the dishes, I have my gun on me. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I take it off. It's part of me, like a cell phone's in my pocket, like most people. It's what I'm used to. Feels weird when I don't have it.
That may sound weird to some people that you carry in your house, but I've heard it's kind of it's a funny statement. Haha, it makes a great meme. But 100% of home invasions occur at home, right? So
exactly.
And it's not like I live in rural New Hampshire. You know what I mean? I'm out a dead end dirt road, and there's one house past me and 3 before me, and the road's a mile and a half long. don't even lock my house sometimes. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I'm not paranoid that something's going to happen in my home. It's just a matter of I'm ADD, and when I need to go and get in my truck and leave, I don't want to have to worry about, okay, where's my gun? Where's my wallet? Where's my phone? Like, everything just stays in its spot.
Gotcha.
You know, and when I go, everything's with me. I don't have to worry about searching for everything. And when I finish up for the night, it comes off, and that's that.
Yeah. Okay. Jordan, how about you, man? How often do you carry?
All day, every day. In my line of work, it's just something that, you know, I have a lot of gear that I have to have on me at all times. And just like we discussed earlier, you know, and like Mark pointed out, just having to deal with the feeling that, you know, maybe I could have, would have, should have, if I'd had my gun on me.
Right.
That's not something I ever want to deal with. I don't want to ever question, you know, could I have saved a few more lives if I had had my gun on me instead of in my car? That sort of thing that's my primary motivation. And also being a bigger guy, a lot of people claim it makes it carrying a gun a little more uncomfortable for them, but I have no problems concealing a full-size gun.
Yeah.
And actually I'm just, you know, I'm more proficient with them. It's more comfortable to me. I may even have Mark beat in terms of frequency of carry, but I'm not going to admit to committing felonies. But yeah, it's just on me all the time. It's something that my friends and family know and are comfortable with, and I think even forget sometimes, but it's just something that as soon as I throw my belt on, the holster's going on with it in the morning before I leave my room, and it doesn't come off until I get back into bed. So.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I think, I was talking to somebody earlier, and I was trying to, we're talking about concealed carry and stuff, and we're talking on the phone, so they couldn't see me. And, I described myself. I said, hey, I built like a linebacker. I'm as wide as a wall and about as aerodynamic, and I'm kind of like you, man. If I shove a full size, firearm in my waistband at roughly, the 4 o'clock position. So like, kind of like slightly behind my right hip, it disappears. Us bigger boys can conceal a full size gun easier than the smaller guys can, which is why you guys need to eat, clean your plates when you sit down at dinner. It's easier for you to conceal a gun.
That's right.
Absolutely.
It's for your own good.
It is. And so, you should eat your food.
That's right.
I think something else that's important to point out is just the necessity of having a good belt. That's something that plagued me early on when I was carrying. It wasn't even just the lack of a good holster, but a good belt. And I've currently got a couple from Kurt at Blue Alpha Gear. I know there's lots of makers that offer similar style belts, but it's really convenient. The latch, I don't know what the style is called, but the male end fits through, or no, the female end fits through my belt loops. They've got all kinds of options, and it's reinforced. It's sturdy. It's very convenient, not having to deal with buckles. I don't think I could ever go back to a fancy dress belt with the traditional hole system. It's comfortable. It holds my gun exactly where I put it. I don't have to worry about, things sagging. And that's something that's especially important to consider if you carry a metal gun, an all steel gun. You got a lot of weight to deal with. The Glock that I've got right now is just a little over half the weight of the gun I used to carry.
Right.
My CZSP01. So that and my P10C, when that's inside my waistband, it doesn't feel like there's anything there. I used to be very conscious of having a gun on my hip just because it was solid.
Yeah.
But now it's just like having a phone in my pocket, Yeah. It's just a constant that's always there, but you don't really feel it, and it's not heavy enough to notice. Stays right where I want it. I always know where the grip is located. So,
our listeners might be surprised to know that you could probably do a whole episode on belts and the importance of them, or the importance
Absolutely.
of them. I
sure can.
Yeah. It makes it or break it. And I'd say that, just, as a quick aside, if you're struggling with carrying a firearm, because it's not comfortable, or you feel like it's printing and everybody can see it, you might really want to take a look at, both your holster and also your belt, a belt that pulls it in tight and supports the weight of it and is designed to support the weight of it. I'm not talking about a $20 Walmart belt, but, something that's purpose built to carry the weight of a firearm. makes all the difference in the world. You can get them in leather, you can get them in nylon, whatever. So, it doesn't have to stick out like a sore thumb. It's entirely possible to get something that's, heck, I wear my gun belt to work every day, not with a gun, but it's a nice leather belt with a nice buckle and, looks like a dress belt. So,
that's
has a clue.
I is the same. Mine's a 511.
Yeah.
But it's a nice dress belt because I have to wear slacks and, a nice shirt where I can't necessarily wear a black nylon web belt with Velcro in the front.
Right.
And it looks good and it is, it's sturdy. It's supportive. So you don't have to think about, well, how is this going to match my outfit?
Right.
Where, there's a lot of gear manufacturers now that offer so many different options. What my clothing is for the day should never be an excuse to whether or not I carry.
Yeah, I'll admit that most of us men are, you're lucky we wear pants when we walk out of the house, ladies. But, my wife, she prefers not to wear a belt with, jeans. I think that's kind of the style for a lot of women's, pants and, and jeans. And, in her professional career, she wears, scrubs at a hospital. And, you're certainly not wearing a belt for that. One of the things that she's found that works really well for her, and I think it would work well for a lot of women and also, even men that, perhaps you're a jogger or you're wearing scrubs or something like that, or, you're headed to the gym, is she found this company called Can Concealment. And the thing looks like a bit like a girdle. So guys, that might threaten your masculinity a little bit, but, the thing is kind of, rides low on her hip and, she can shove a gun in there, a cell phone, a mag, a knife, a flashlight, whatever. And with a, just a moderately loose fitting t-shirt, you'd never notice it, so, there's a lot of options out there, especially, try to fit something like that into your lifestyle. So,
it's funny we were mentioning this now because today we had a return at Squared Away Customs on a kind of a concealment style OWB holster. It's called the Oscar. It rides high and tight to the body. It's concealable with a t-shirt or a hoodie type of thing. And customer wrote a big, nasty, long note with the return, stating that the gun is sitting 1 3/4 inches off of his body when it's on him, and that when he goes to draw the weapon, it's pulling his pants up over 3 inches and is having a hard time coming out. And that it's floppy.
Yeah.
And this isn't going to do. I rely on this to save my life. You shouldn't be, sending product.
How
out
dare
like this.
you? Right. You guys making quality stuff. Right. Yeah.
I was thinking to myself, like, we've probably sold 3,000 Oscars in the last 5 years. You know what I mean? Like, we don't get returns. We don't get a lot of returns. I'm not trying to brag, but we just don't.
Sure.
And so
I have
first
an
thing I always
Oscar for
do,
multiple firearms.
Yep.
the first thing I did, Corey, my right hand man in production, strips his belt off, pulls his gun off, slaps this thing on, and it happened to be the same gun he carries, the SIG P320.
Right.
He sticks his gun in it. I take pictures of it. It's touching his glove handle region.
Yeah.
Right. And he goes to draw and he tugs it. He doesn't jerk it out like you're in a threat situation. He tugs it and pops right out.
Right.
I send the guy a text. I was like, "What are you wearing for a belt?" And guess what? He was a 1-inch Walmart leather belt.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, those things are flimsy, right? I mean, a good leather belt is going to hold the weight.
So he's got a SIG P320.
Never had any
with
problems
16
with
rounds
mine.
in it. Right. 16 rounds in it. So it's tipping out at the top. And then when he pulls it, the belt's flexing rather than staying rigid.
Right.
Of course he's having problems.
Yeah.
And he's still, he's being thick about it and still blaming the holster. That's fine. He gets his refund and we'll sell his holster. But
right.
A belt, we have it in the FAQ. We have it in terms and conditions. A belt is just as important as the holster.
It's a foundation, right? I mean, if you fail there, you're going to fail everywhere else. So yeah.
Yep.
All right.
And I would actually really love to plug Boxer Tactical. It's a belt company that I've been with now for about 3 years. Billy and his crew
Yes.
make a phenomenal product, and it's they have their slogan. It's honestly American.
Yeah.
Like every screw, every thread, every bit of it is 100% American made product.
It's funny you mentioned Billy and Boxer Tactical. So Billy and Boxer Tactical, or just Billy, had been a very frequent guest on one of my favorite podcasts. And I'm not gonna lie, they kind of changed the formula of the podcast a little bit, and I quit listening to it as much as I used to. And that's part of the reason why Shooters Nation even exists. But long story short, very familiar with them. And Billy's actually got a really cool story about, his company, and, his family was in the clothing industry. And so, part of his mission is to bring quality manufacturing back to the United States. I'd love to have that guy on the show just to talk about that.
I could absolutely text him tomorrow and set it up for next week.
That would be fantastic. I would love it, because, I'm just a fan, first of all, of small business and the American entrepreneur. But, like I said, we could do a whole show on belts and bore the snot out of people that they're thinking. But, I'll be honest with you guys that are listening, it's more important than you think it is. If you're having trouble with your carry, and integrating that with your daily lifestyle, I would really start looking at your belt. It's probably the problem. So,
and that signal is amplified when you think about an extra mag carrier, or a knife, or anything else. Flashlight. There's a lot of guys now that have dedicated a flashlight pouch or something. So that signal is drastically amplified when you start hanging more and more stuff off of that 1-inch wide braided leather Walmart belt.
Ask any carpenter or ask any repairman that carries, some tools on their belt, and they're going to look at you like you're crazy if you say, I want to hang all that weight off of a 1-inch wide Walmart leather belt. That's, So, cool. All right. Well, guys, I tell you what, we're close to the midpoint of the show, so I'd like to take a break, and we'll recognize one of our friends in the gun industry who happens to be here with us. Mark, you're going to get another plug, but we'll take a break, and we'll let you guys listening. We're gonna hook you up with some information about Squared Away Customs, and if any of this has resonated with you and you want to look at Mark's products, please do so. And we will be right back with you here in just in a moment. So stick by. Hey folks, David here. I want you to think about the handgun you carry for your own protection, and I really want you to think about the holster you carry it in. Do you have trouble concealing your handgun? Does it feel like no matter what you do or how you dress, it's painfully obvious to everyone that you're carrying concealed? Well, I want to take a moment to introduce you to Squared Away Customs. Squared Away Customs is a manufacturer of custom, high-quality holsters for both concealed carry and duty carry. They provide a catalog of holster designs to choose from, and they are glad to take on custom work to design something to meet your specific needs. Mark and his team take pride in providing an excellent product at a reasonable cost. They work hard to keep delivery times short, and their number one goal is to ensure that their customers are satisfied. Squared Away Customs also offers a heroes discount to military, police, emergency medical workers, and educators. And for listeners of the Shooters Nation podcast, Mark offers a reduced pricing if you use coupon code Shooters Nation. Again, that's Shooters Nation as the coupon code. So, before you strap that cheap floppy store-bought holster on again, head over to squaredawaycustoms.com and treat yourself and your carry gun to something more worthy of the challenge. Welcome back to the Shooters Nation podcast. This is David, and again, I'm here tonight with Jordan, Brad, and also co-hosting tonight with me is Mark from Squared Away Customs. So, we've been talking about, I guess, what you would roughly call being the armed citizen. And so, we're kind of coming, I want to be respectful of time because, we got some feedback from folks that, they really felt like the ideal podcast length was about an hour to an hour and a half. So, we'll try to be mindful of that. But before we switch gears, talking about being the armed citizen, I wanted to ask one more question for everybody. And I think this is kind of maybe this is something that others are kind of thinking about too. But how has carrying a handgun changed your lifestyle? So, Brad, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, sure. There are places now that my wife and I specifically choose not to visit or give our money purely based on their stance on firearms. Call it a safe space, if you will. There are places that advertise to the evildoers that this is a buffet for you. Please come in and fill your plate.
Right.
And I choose not to be a part of those, places, and I don't give them my money. On the flip side, there are specific restaurants that welcome firearms, and just, the sign jokingly says they ask for judicious marksmanship. But there are some places where you feel more comfortable knowing, one, that you're welcome there. And if you're welcome there, there's a pretty good chance that another good guy with a gun is in that same establishment. If something goes down, it's, two heads are better than one. There's two guns are definitely better than one in a crap situation. So, just thinking about where you go in your everyday life, stores, restaurants, going to the movies, things like that. There are a lot of places that welcome, our people, I guess you would say. And there are a lot of places that don't want our business.
So you vote.
Knowing where those places are, knowing where you can spend your money is pretty important.
Right. You're choosing to vote with your wallet. And I mean, that's good. That's admirable. I mean, you're walking the walk, not just talking it. That's impressive. Yeah. I think that probably resonates with a lot of our listeners. I try to do the same. So kudos. Jordan, how about you, man?
Yeah. Carrying a gun has changed my life just in the sense that it's just from the moment I first put a gun on, I was instantly aware of the fact that I was armed, and I was kind of at first a little paranoid. I felt like everywhere I went that people would notice, would see me, see that I was carrying a gun, and not that I had any evil intent, not that it would be a problem, but it's something that just instantly sparked that situational awareness. And I don't think that I was uncautious before, but I'd say that's the biggest change in my life. Is just that, carrying a firearm has kind of prompted me to be aware of my surroundings at all times, to pay attention to things that other people don't think about. I think something that's common, a lot of people pick up, is just, if you're sitting in a booth at a restaurant, always, as awkward as it might be, asking your friends to let you sit on the outside, facing the door, or, being aware of where the entrances and exits are, just being mindful of stuff like that. And it doesn't really need to, it kind of sounds almost like a chore, but it's really not that much, it doesn't really change your day-to-day life. It's not something that is always such a conscious thing. It's just something that you start doing subconsciously.
Right.
And I'd say that's probably the biggest change that being armed everywhere I go has made. It's just made me more aware of my surroundings, even on time, even in places like up in Canada for work, where I'm not able to be armed.
Right.
definitely makes a difference in the way I conduct myself as compared to when I was,
Let me ask
20.
you a question about that. So I've traveled for work to California and the San Francisco Bay Area. Beautiful town, really. I think, I really like San Francisco, which may sound kind of strange for somebody that I'm a gun owner, and that's like verboten, completely forbidden out there, right? So,
well, you own CZs,
right? That's right. Yeah, I wore my scarf, and I
doubt they're on the roster.
I drank a soy latte as I walked around, but it's a beautiful city, and the people are genuinely friendly, and there's some strange ones out there. That's kind of part of the fun and the charm is the interesting personalities that you encounter out on the streets and stuff, but. I felt naked out there without a handgun. So, how did you feel, Jordan, when you go to Canada and places like that where, non-permissive environments? How does that make you feel?
Yeah, honestly, it's just unnerving. Even the car ride there, just the whole week or 2 week stretch that you're out, makes me feel. And part of it's not necessarily just not carrying a gun. Like you said, it does. I do feel naked when I don't have my gun on me, because even though, like we mentioned earlier, having a good belt and holster and a light gun, it's not something that you really think about. But when it's not there, you can absolutely feel the absence of that gun.
Right.
Being in Canada specifically just makes me aware of the fact that not only am I not armed, but it's highly unlikely that anyone around me is.
Right.
I mean, almost, the odds are basically zero that anyone around me is armed and able to defend us, if need be. So it's kind of unnerving. The nice thing is when I'm traveling in Canada for work, almost all the time we're on job sites or in transit. But yeah, I definitely don't feel safe. And, I have a couple other, it's just having some knives, that can be kind of disguised as, work tools.
Right.
That's some measure of potential protection, but it's not something that I've trained with to be as proficient as, if the need for lethal force and self-defense arises, that's definitely not going to be my go-to as a primary. So yeah, it's unnerving and unsettling, and it's just kind of eye-opening to realize that there's an entire culture and community that's been disarmed and is often
it's fairly
vulnerable.
defenseless, right? Yeah. I was thinking about it as you were talking. I didn't feel paranoid when I was in San Francisco and couldn't have my handgun. I carried a pocket knife, and it's probably a pocket knife. I'll be honest with you, probably a pocket knife that San Francisco police would not have approved of. Right, it was an automatic or an assisted opening. It wasn't an automatic; it was an assisted opening knife, and the blade was. I did try to carry one that was 3 inches or shorter. That way, if I was questioned or had to use it, I wouldn't be buried under the jail somewhere. But I didn't feel paranoid. I just felt naked because, Mark, to your point earlier, it's part of your daily attire, right? I mean, you put that on, on your hip the same way that you put your cell phone or your keys in your pants pocket. And so I was aware of the fact that part of my daily, my daily routine of getting dressed in the morning and getting prepared to go about it, when I'm not at work, but my daily weekend or evening attire, was now missing a component, and I might as well have been walking out of the hotel without one shoe on, so it was kind of weird. Okay. So Mark, how about you? How has carrying a handgun changed your lifestyle, or has it?
Yeah, no, definitely in some significant ways in that, like, you and Brad said that there's certain establishments that I just won't give my money to anymore. If they're not willing to accept my choice, then I'm not going to go spend my money there. But then there's also some fun ways, like I've had to teach my daughter not to run and give me a big hug when she sees me, because her head was just about eye level with an appendix carry Glock, and she'd crack her forehead off my gun. And be like, Dad, you're gunned. And I would be someplace like,
ouch.
Like, I don't know where, but like some public place where I don't need my 6-year-old saying, Dad, you're gunned.
Right.
So yeah, it's changed my life. And then I've had to teach her to say, belt buckle, not gun. And that nobody needs to know Dad has a gun other than you.
Right.
And
send her to a nice Christian college where she can learn the side hug.
And just to not run and headbutt. But now she's 10, so she's a little taller than that. But my son is coming along, so he will be there eventually, so I'll have to teach him as well.
Right.
So I think it's changed a lot of ways, though. Other than that, there's the mindset way, that I touched on earlier. It's like whether to carry and not to carry and why.
Right.
But then there's also the types of situations that you can allow yourself to be in when you have a gun on you.
Yeah.
I'm at a dinner and a buddy is drinking and they get out of hand and they get in a fight. where do I want to be in this situation?
Right.
Typically, I'd be 100% on his back, pulling the other guy off, XYZ, who knows?
Right.
But when you have a gun on you, it changes the whole dynamic of everything.
Right. It does. And
you really need to be cognitive to that. And if you're not, I think you're asking for trouble. So, thinking about what you're doing, thinking about where you're going, thinking about who you're with, thinking about who's around you every day, all day. And I am not a paranoid guy, and everybody's like, oh, you must be paranoid. I'm not paranoid at all. It's just a different way. It's just a different lifestyle. And I relate to the cell phone thing all the time. It's like, you won't leave your house without your cell phone. Yeah, I have a little bit of a heavier one, and it rides right in the front of my pants, and you can't even see it. And I'm not on it all day. While you're walking around and walking into water fountains, I'm making sure that you're safe by keeping an eye out everywhere.
Yeah.
It's a mindset, and that's the biggest change, I think, is having the mindset. It's not a physical change; it's a mindset change.
It's interesting to me how life, has these weird patterns. And now, granted, I'll admit that part of this is, just the people that we talk to and stuff. But our mutual friend Jason, who we're going to have on the show very soon, he and I were speaking earlier, and we're talking about the fact that, and I don't want to spoil it because, this could steal some of the thunder of a future episode, but hopefully, if you're listening, this is a bit of a teaser because I think you want to come back for that one in particular. We want you to come back for all of them, but I think you'll really like that one. He said that, there's a difference between a gunfight and a firefight. A firefight's when bullets are flying, right? But a gunfight is any altercation in which a gun is present. And, you touched on that a second ago. If you're out with your buddies and somebody gets a little mouthy and, one of your buddies decides he's going to, square off with that guy, if you get involved, guess what? That's now a gunfight because a gun was present, So, yeah. Interesting. It's just, I don't know, it's kind of funny how these patterns play out, to me at least. So, I'll take a swing at it then. So, it's changed partially the way I dress. On the weekends and the evenings, I'm pretty casual. Cargo pants, cargo shorts, t-shirt, loose t-shirt. Generally something that I can, hide or conceal a handgun in, fairly well. But I'll tell you that I'm just going to be completely transparent with our listeners because hopefully this helps somebody out there. It has helped me with my temper. And, I grew up in a I'm going to say a loving house. My parents loved me and my brother and cared for us greatly and sacrificed for us greatly. But, my mom had an amazing temper and, I inherited that. It's been a constant struggle from my, teenage years forward to keep that thing in check. And, I think it was my grandfather probably, pretty sure it was him that told me, when I began to carry a gun, for my self-protection, as a former law enforcement officer, him as a former law enforcement officer, he was, well-versed with, carrying a gun. And he said, son, if you're going to put the gun in the holster, leave your middle finger at home. And, it's kind of a pithy statement that grandfathers, like to give, their grandkids. But I thought about that and I've carried it with me ever since then. And it's just, if I've got that gun, and I'm on the road and somebody cuts me off or whatever, the last thing I'm going to resort to is my middle finger. I try to laugh it off and just think, man, you stranger guy in the car that's cutting me off and flipping me off and brake checking me or whatever else, I'm just going to laugh. I'm going to back off. I'm going to try to at least because, you have no idea what's in my car. I know what's in it, and likewise, I have no idea what's in yours. And I don't want to escalate that by being the guy that throws a middle finger back or gets mouthy back in a public venue or whatever else. I've had to learn to practice restraint and become a pacifist, and it's just water off my back. Words don't hurt, fists thrown.
I've never heard
guns.
that before. And that's awesome. The leave your middle finger at home thing. That's
yeah.
Is that something that like a known thing, or is that just something he told
he told me?
I've never heard that before. I
leave
think
your middle
that's
finger
awesome.
at home. And I think he had other things that were kind of fun. He'd tell you I don't know, man. Brad, was this a Kentucky statement? As a Kentucky euphemism, he'd don't let your butt flap hit you in the back of the head, right? Kind of like don't lose your temper and stuff like that. So yeah,
I don't know that this exact terminology was based solely out of Western Kentucky, where we both started our upraising, but I can definitely remember my grandfather dropping little truth bombs and and words of wisdom,
right?
Similar wordsmithing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, little nuggets of wisdom there. Yeah. He had some great ones. Kind of miss him every day, but that was one of his things, was leave your middle finger at home. If you're gonna put the gun in your holster, leave your middle finger at home. And it was just his way of saying, put your ego in check, keep your temper in check, because now you're carrying something that can make an easily diffusable situation far much worse. You've brought a gun, you've introduced a gun into what could have been an exchange of words or a pushing match or a fist fight. So I try to avoid every bit of that. Now it's my responsibility to do that. So last thing I want to do is introduce a gun into a situation that didn't require it. And I think that's listeners, that's a common thread that you'll hear in this, is that, most of our guests and the people that train citizens to be armed and responsible, they would probably unanimously say not every problem is a gun problem. And, if you go into life carrying a gun and thinking that, I forget who it was in this episode said that, I think it's you, Brad, if you're looking for an opportunity to use that gun, man, you're the wrong kind of carrier. You shouldn't be.
Exactly.
Please leave that thing at home until you get your mindset straight. So yeah. That's how it's changed my life. Is it's just made me a little bit more tempered, if you will, even tempered. So, all right. So guys, again, being mindful of our time, I think we've got, I'd say comfortably about another, 15, 20 minutes at most. Let's talk about current events, right? So I'm thinking that this is actually going to prescribe that this show gets released a week earlier. Kind of like so far we're on a bi-weekly release schedule. And so this one may go out sooner just because I want it to be timely. But let's talk about the walkout day, the National School Walkout Day. So as we record this right now, it's Thursday evening, March the 15th. And so yesterday, obviously, Wednesday the 14th. And that was National School Walkout Day. And these were the walkouts that students were executing to protest or to observe and remember the terrible school shooting in Parkland, Florida. And so as I was doing a little bit of reading up on this, the New York Times described as this. They said that, and I apologize, New York Times is something that I normally, line my dog cage with or something, but it's the first thing on Google. So it said the walkouts generally lasted for 17 minutes, one for each of the Parkland, Florida victims. 2 more nationwide protests are set to take place on March 24th and on April 20th, the anniversary of the Columbine shooting. So I guess the anniversary of the Columbine shooting is April 20th. And, but there's another protest coming up on March 24th. So just something to keep in mind. And so let's talk about that a little bit, if you guys don't mind. I'll say this, as I've really dug into it, I've asked the question, do these kids even really know what they're walking out for? And I'll be gracious and say, I think that they all recognize that it's a walkout in remembrance and to honor the victims of the Parkland shooting in Florida. And I support that. It's terrible. No child should go to school and fear that they might not come home from that. So by all means, we should remember that. As a society, we should learn from that. But, I don't know, guys, you've looked through some of the show notes. What do you think's really going on here with these walkouts? Jordan, you want to start off? Brad, go ahead.
If I could step in here a
go
minute. I feel like there is as much of a cultural emphasis as there is a political emphasis. Growing up in Western Kentucky, Heath High School in 1997.
Yes, sir.
Marshall County High School
just this year.
In just this year. You know, those are two neighboring counties that when I was in high school, and still to this day, my high school played their high school teams in football and basketball.
Right.
I knew kids that went to those schools. Right. I knew, parents, that lived in the neighboring county that worked with my father at the production plant.
Right.
The culture of those areas is way different than South Florida.
Sure.
And that brings up 2 points in that the two schools in Kentucky did not participate in these walkouts. The high school in my small town, South Carolina now did not participate in the walkouts. Now, take the political side out of it, just the cultural, it proves that, like I say, the rural areas where kids grow up with firearms, they hunt, they fish, and, the father gets them that first gun at 10 or 11 or 12 years old. And that's different than South Florida.
Right.
But it also proves the point that this type of stuff can happen anywhere.
Sure can.
There is no one is immune. There is nothing that makes anyone listening to this podcast anywhere in this nation any more immune or subject to a tragic event like that happening. I was a junior in high school when Heath High School took place. I knew a couple of the kids there. I still think about it today. My little brother was, when he first moved out, he lived right beside one of the Jenkins twins in Murray.
Right.
So, there's, being small town, there is a, call it a 6th degree of separation, or 5th or 4th or 3rd degree of separation that maybe those kids in Florida and some of these other big cities, they don't have.
Right.
And it's the culture. They're growing up differently, and their entire goals and dreams are totally different than what we see in some of these or other rural areas or small town USA.
Yeah. I don't want to talk too much right now because I want to give Mark and Jordan a chance to respond. But we have a home connection to the Heath High School shootings and also the Marshall County shootings. The Heath High School shootings. My father knew the father of the shooter, and I think that as I think about that, what I think is different today, especially about the Orange Park. Florida area, or I'm sorry, Parkland, Florida area, is the response, and how the blame is shifting to the object, the tool of violence, not the individual. Looking back at that now as a father myself, I think my job is to make sure that my kids grow up and treat each other, and other kids kindly, and they're equipped to deal with the problems in their life, and the old saying, there by the grace of God go I think, man, that could be anybody. You just don't know. And unless you're just in every moment of your kids' lives, you don't know what they're subjected to. You don't know what they're carrying around and what anger and angst and whatever. So, all that to not to try to diminish what happened in Florida, but, I think as a society, right now, I'm worried that people are focusing on the wrong thing, and some of it's just flat hypocritical, and we're missing the key point, which is there's a human element of this that needs to be addressed and corrected. So anyway, that's it. I'll step off my soapbox because I could, I don't even know where I was going with that. It's just that I know that it's destructive to families all the way around when things like this happen. So anyway, Jordan, what do you think?
Yes. My perspective in this is a little interesting because I grew up in Iowa and was pretty politically involved. And and have worked in politics, whether for candidates or organizations, advocacy groups. And so I'm very familiar with the fact that almost all grassroots campaigning or activity, if you will, is not grassroots at all. It's quite often highly manufactured and funded by nameless entities.
Right.
And something that really strikes me in all of this, because I'm sure we've all seen on Facebook that, I certainly have many friends who are, quite vocal in calling for something to be done.
Right.
Something needs to be done. And I have other friends that are, like Mark mentioned earlier, they don't have the proper mindset. They've got, and I shouldn't say it that way, but it's more than the come and take it in a liberty sense, but they almost are just yearning for a fight. When's the Civil War going to break out? Yeah. I'm ready. And
God, they don't want that really, but yeah.
No, and none of us really do, or if we do, we're ignorant and don't know what we're talking about.
Right.
How brutal and that would be. And so something that's come to me quite often, and it's attributed to Joseph Stalin, whether he said it or not, but the phrase, a single death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic. And I'm paraphrasing, but and something that's very interesting to me in all of this is how whether we're calling for gun control or not, there's all this use of statistics, and especially I think the two major buzzwords I hear are school shootings and mass shootings. And something that's very important to consider is that, if you're going to use statistics, I should just put it this way. If you actually care about a problem, you need to consider what all the causes of that problem are. And if all you're throwing out are statistics, it reveals that you're trying to use the death of innocent men, women, and children as a political tool.
Yeah.
At least that's what I believe.
No, it's a speaking point, right?
Yeah. And we hear about mass shootings. That seems to be all that anyone cares about, or the AR-15.
Yeah.
When in reality, if you want to look at the statistics, less than 1,000 people a year on average are killed in the United States with a rifle of any type, bolt action, semi-automatic, lever action, doesn't matter. It's usually about 700 to 800, or at least in previous years. And those are each of those deaths is a tragedy. I grew up in Iowa, but my dad's family is in Northern Illinois, Rockford and Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
My girlfriend's from Chicago, South Side. I believe it's 96, 97 people who've been murdered just in 2018. That's a number of
and we're barely
homicides
3 months in.
Yeah, we're in the middle of March, and there are over 400 people that have been shot this year in Chicago alone. Why we don't hear about that, or as we talked about earlier before the podcast, the deaths as a result of drug overdoses. Each of those deaths is a tragedy, but that's not being addressed, and we're being told that we have a problem, that this is a cultural problem,
right?
That and it's what's happening is we are being made to care. That's what's happened, and I know we don't want to devolve into other political discussions, but that's something that's become a constant in my lifetime is divide and conquer. It's using identity politics to put people at odds with each other when no one thinks that there ought to be more school shootings. No one thinks that children should feel unsafe when they go to school.
Right.
And yet we're all arguing on social media with each other as though we're somehow at odds. And the issue is that that the deaths of innocent men and women and children are being used as a political tool to push an agenda that won't make anyone safer. It's not about guns. It's about control. And there's some people and this is something we've talked about, just going over how has carrying a gun changed your life. Much of it is the mindset that you're responsible for your own protection and the lives of your family and friends. And I think there's a deep divide between the people who've been raised to believe that the government is the arbiter of their rights, and that they that we all collectively, authorize certain individuals to be responsible for the protection of us as individuals.
Right.
And there's a divide between that group and those of us who believe that we carry the responsibility for our own lives.
Well, I mean, I think about it, right? And so, it's the media and, not to get too far off into, maybe what some would call tinfoil hat territory, but, the media and those that are paying the bills for the media to do their work are demonizing the tool, and whether it's the AR-15 or a car or whatever. And frankly, cars don't get talked about. We don't demonize cars very much because everybody likes cars. You got to get to work. But it's kind of like, we have this weird dichotomy of, crime and criminals using firearms versus responsible gun owners. And, responsible gun owners statistically seem to completely outnumber, the number of people that use the gun as a tool of evil. And yet, if one person, I'll say this, if one person has they get in a car and they, they're impaired or they're angry or whatever, and they run over somebody else on the road, there's not an outcry to ban cars. We don't punish the majority for the acts or the indiscretions or the irresponsibility of the minority. We just don't do that. That's not the basis of our culture. Yet here we are talking about something that, somebody, whether you subscribe to the idea or not, that there are people that are trying to disarm us as a citizenry, somebody doesn't like guns. So we're going to make very sure that is demonized. And it's ridiculous how loud the minority is, the minority of evil incidences involving guns versus the majority of people that, again, you stand next to people like me and you three gentlemen in restaurants and, shopping lines and things like that. And you have no idea that we're carrying a gun because that gun did not just magically pop out of our holsters and start shooting people. It requires evil intent behind the trigger. And, that's not what the majority of gun owners are about, thankfully.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think something else that's important to consider is how often firearms are used in defensive circumstances. There's a study that's been popularized by some pundits that from the CDC, estimating that the number could be as high as 3 million or as low as 500,000 uses a year, and even other. I've seen certain news organizations trying to say, well, we examining everything and coming up with the number of 108,000. Well, 108,000 compared to 30,000 deaths or homicides resulting in the use of firearms each year. That's still just an overwhelming number. That means that each one of those 108,000, 500,000, potentially several million cases in which a gun was used as a defensive tool, each one of those could or most likely would have been another statistic,
right?
Another tragedy.
I'll mention
something that we don't hear about.
I'll mention this real quick, and then I want to give Mark a chance to opine on this. But so I look at the statistics for the podcast, and one of the things that the technology allows us to see is where people are on the globe as they who's listening to the podcast. And we've had some listeners from the United Kingdom. And so one of them might be a former coworker. And so shout out to her. Just let you know, I know you're maybe listening, and thank you for that. But I see it on social media a lot where, participants from other countries outside the United States ask questions, and sometimes they're genuine questions. They're seeking to understand, what is it really like in the United States? Are people walking around, can you just walk down the street and people are, their guns on their hips like the Wild West? It's that prolific, or, what? And so what they're hearing is what the media is telling them, which is, we're just all going to our guns constantly around here. And, I'll be honest. No, I've learned to kind of spot when I think I can see a bulge under somebody's shirt and you know, it might be a gun. And I'm probably going to, if I get a chance, to be like, hey man, what are you carrying? Right. Yeah. Cause I'm curious, not because I'm calling them out, but no, I mean, people aren't walking around with their guns in their hands, you know, ordering Big Macs at McDonald's and, you know, nonsense like that. You know, fortunately we have the ability to carry implements that can be used for life. You know, to go back to something Mark said at the very first part of the show, here in this country. And the world is an increasingly dangerous place. You know, it doesn't take very much research on the news to see. I mean, how much good news do you hear on the news these days? You know, you probably, you know, would have more difficult time finding good news on the news than bad news. You know, assaults and you know, robberies and rapes and you know,
well, good news doesn't sell.
No, good news doesn't sell. It doesn't, right? Yeah, if you were in the good news business, you'd probably be completely broke. You know, unless you're Hallmark and you're making greeting cards. But you know, it's a dangerous world, and it's not getting any friendlier or any safer. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, the reason why you hear about more shootings, you know, in the United States is because we've got some bad people in this country that are seeking to hurt and kill and steal and, you know, injure other people for no reason whatsoever. And I think that goes back to a mental health issue and maybe just a decline in general ethics and morality. And, you know, I don't think that's a United States thing. I think that's a global thing. It's just that we happen to have a tool available to us that others don't have and perhaps wish that they did. You know, maybe that's the lid on the pressure cooker in the United States, is that, you know, the guy that's thinking about causing harm to a restaurant full of diners is thinking twice, because maybe there's some people in there that have a gun and they're going to end his life quickly, you know? So I don't know, just a theory.
You know, I think that, you know, I read it earlier, and I struggling remember where I got it from, but, you know, America's gun violence, you know, represents a failure of like leadership, not laws, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, who is getting into the minds of these children, these kids that make this okay?
Yeah.
Like, how is this happening? They're not just like a switch turning crazy, right?
Right.
So there's a disconnect, and we're not looking at that, right?
Yeah.
But for some reason, this huge population of this country thinks that creating a law and putting up a sign that says no guns allowed in this school is going to stop them. You know, and I asked the question, so what makes you think that they're not gonna, you know, that they'd be willing to commit murder but not cross the line of your ban?
Yeah.
Guns?
Oh, there's a sign. I shouldn't bring my gun in here. I should take it back to my car.
Yeah.
Right.
No, they're willing to They're willing to commit, and they're intending to commit, you know, one of the worst crimes there is.
Right.
But a trespassing with a firearm is going to stop them.
Right. Yeah, that sign's not going to do anything.
In what world do you live in that thinks a ban is going to stop this?
Yeah.
You know, and I've said it from the beginning, you cannot legislate evil.
Right.
Period.
Right.
The end. You can't.
No.
Like, if there's no law that's going to stop anybody.
Yeah.
Ever.
Oh, me. So, yeah, go ahead, Brad.
Well, like, you know, a couple of us have hinted around, and what Mark just said, the disconnect, and where are these kids learning this behavior? And, you know, I feel like the disconnect it's at the kitchen table.
Could be. Yeah.
Why are these conversations not happening between parents and kids?
Right.
Because the kids are stuck on their cell phones, and parents want to be their kid's friend or their buddy.
Right.
Versus, you know, trying to teach them some of the things that they're going to need to get through life. I guess you call it, I'm a good kid. I was a good kid because I knew that if I did something stupid when I got home, or probably before I got home, my mom and dad were going to know about it.
Right. Yeah.
I was going to reap what I sowed earlier that day when I got home. And that does not appeal to me. And I don't feel like, I'm really trying hard not to tell people how to raise their kids, but have conversations with them. We need to know what's going on in their lives, who they're talking to, are they being bullied? Are they the bully?
Yeah. Yeah.
Some things like that. Just a conversation can really cure a lot.
Yeah. I think
it reminds me of a couple things. Like one thing is, what are those? Are they called like some e-cards? Is that what it is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this one, and I'm not sure if the language is not allowed, but
we'll bleep it.
Make you bleep it. It's it was like, wow, you're hard on your kids, and then the response is like, yeah, that's why they're not little assholes,
right?
Yeah,
and it's like, I'm exactly, and almost to a fault that bugs me, kind of. Like my dad was, right? Because we're very different human beings, very, very different humans. But my parenting is very similar, which is odd because we are so different in so many ways. And it's just it goes into the whole snowflake thing, like. Sorry, dude. Like my daughter's 10. Like, I am not. I am not treating her like a delicate flower.
Right.
I'm treating her like she needs to, because she needs to have a backbone. She needs to be a strong woman.
Yeah, she's gonna be a self-rescuing princess. To be, right?
Poor me and entitled.
Yeah.
And when I see that, because she gets a little bit of that from her mom, my ex, and man, it's frustrating.
Right.
And I feel like more trips to the range and talks
that's
about gun safety and not taking anybody's crap is doing her wonders.
Yeah.
And,
well, if you gentlemen are okay with it, I want to go ahead and kind of wrap things up. We're roughly an hour and 45 minutes into it, nearly. So, you guys set the stage perfectly, and we didn't practice this, we didn't rehearse it, and I think it's just the thing that resonates with each of us. And so, anyway, all right,
David,
guys.
if you don't mind, I have a couple closing thoughts. One is sensationalism sells.
Okay.
The media will always be invested in making the situation seem worse than it is.
Yeah.
This is the greatest time to be alive as a human. Human flourishing across the globe is at a point it's never been at, and it's improving every year. The second, the Constitution doesn't grant any of us rights. It was written to protect our inalienable rights from being trampled on by a tyrannical government. And third, and maybe this is a bad time to bring it up, but there's a popular psychologist these days who says, I believe the phrase is, evil bloody well exists. And I think that's something we need to consider, that it's not just a mental health issue, that, there but for the grace of God go I.
Yeah.
Something we need to consider is that we are all capable of great evil.
Yeah.
And if we kid ourselves and try to pretend that we're not actively going to be taking precautions in our lives and the lives of our family and friends, the people around us, that, they would never do something horrible like that,
right.
Maybe a little depressed. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that evil does exist,
sure.
and that through, difficult circumstances, we all are capable of far more depraved acts than we like to think.
Yeah.
And that's not a cause for paranoia, but it is a cause for concern. And that's what our motivation to finding solutions to these problems and many others should come from.
Well, I mean, it kind of goes back to where we started the conversation with tonight. It's about being the armed American citizen. And I'll say this, I consider myself a religious person. I had that upbringing, and so evil, quote unquote, has a certain definition to me. But I'll say, this too, that if you're not a religious person and, that's just not, part of your life, I think we could agree that philosophically we could say that the definition of evil is just that depravity that would cause a person, whether it's a genetic misfire or a chemical misfire in their brain or whatever it is, it's that depravity that causes a person to want to do unspeakable harm or death to someone else. That is quote unquote evil. That's the way we put a bow around it and describe it as a neat object or a neat term, so you're right. It exists. It's out there. And, we I think we could all agree that we've chosen to carry a handgun, a firearm, licensed or permitted in our states, for our own protection and that of our families and our loved ones. So, yeah,
absolutely.
Very good point. All right, guys. This was fun. And, I'll say in closing that, I really hope that, you listeners have conversations like this, amongst yourselves, with your friends, but more importantly, that I hope you reach out to others who maybe are on the fence about this whole thing, and, just bring them into the fold. It's sometimes a little awkward to have that quote unquote gun talk with your friends, but, if you pay attention, there's probably people in your lives that are thinking about it and they just don't know how to bring it up. And if you make it safe, maybe just invite somebody to go to the range. Mark, you made a comment earlier. Take your kids to the range, teach them about gun safety, and show them what what a gun can do. And I think if you do that, most kids begin to respect that more, and they at least understand the safety of it, if nothing else, or the inherent danger of not being safe with it. So, gentlemen, I really want to thank you for your time tonight. I enjoyed it, and I hope that our listeners did too. And like I said, I hope they're having conversations like this with their friends, and if not, I hope this inspires them.
Thanks, David.
Yeah,
absolutely. Pleasure.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
Sure.
So I'll say this, for those of you listening, if you'd like to sponsor the show, send us an email at shootersnationradio@gmail.com, and let's talk about it. Likewise, if you have feedback about the show, good or bad or ugly, you can email that to me also at shootersnationradio@gmail.com. I read through all of those, and I'll share those comments with Mark as well. We'll try to take your feedback into consideration and to heart, especially as relates to making the show better. I think we've got some really great shows ahead. We have some practical medicine for the civilian coming up. Also some talks about how to avoid using a gun, which might be kind of surprising. We're going to do a firearms related podcast where we talk about not using a gun. We've got more chats coming up with those involved in firearms training. And soon we're going to put together an episode just for women shooters and those the women who want to go armed. So that I think that's going to be fascinating. I'd like to see that become a recurring topic, really. Just to remind everybody else, you can subscribe to the show at shootersnation.com. We have links now on the front page that take you to iTunes and Stitcher and Google Play, and we're actually now available on Spotify. So we hope that you check us out there and you share us with your friends. Mark, we'll start with you, I guess. Where can folks find you after the show if they want to get in touch with you?
squaredawaycustoms.com is the website. info@squaredawaycustoms.com is the email. Facebook, Instagram, DMs are not always preferred on social media just because so many different platforms to keep track of. But email on the website is fantastic. So
awesome.
Appreciate it.
Brad, Jordan, is there a particular way for folks to get a hold of you, Brad?
Facebook is the best method. I'm not hidden. I don't try to hide behind the keyboard, so I'm not that hard to find. If you want to try and find me, my name is Bradley Jones, and I live in South Carolina. I think there might be one more of me here, and it's just looking through some profile pictures. It'll be very obvious which one I am. So yeah, if anybody would love, to have more conversation, I welcome that.
Sure. I appreciate that. Jordan, how about
absolutely.
you, man?
In the same vein, I can be found on Facebook. My name is pretty unique. Jordan Linscheid. It's LINSCHEID. And if anyone has any questions or comments, wishes to have a discussion, especially if you live in a country or a region that doesn't allow firearms or it's heavily regulated, and you've got questions just from an average guy in the United States from the Midwest, I'd be more than happy to carry that on.
Awesome. So. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Gentlemen, again, I can't thank you enough. I've enjoyed it. I hope that the listeners have. I trust that they have. Those of you listening on the podcast, thanks again for spending some time with us today. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Again, really want your feedback, so be sure to hit us up on shootersnation.com after this. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/shootersnation. We're on the Instagram. I think on Instagram we're Shooters Nation Radio, and on Twitter we're Shooters_Nation because somebody else got Shooters Nation, and they are posting a bunch of stuff in a language that I can't understand. So that's it. It's a wrap. Thanks again, and we will see you again next time. And in the meantime, please be safe.
The preceding segment was a production of the Shooters Nation podcast. Visit us online at shootersnation.com.